Thank you, Andorte, for this introduction. Happy to be here because I've been working here in Denmark for some years, so Denmark was kind of my second home for some years. So I have been trying to learn something to say in Danish over the past years, and I managed to say one thing, rødt grøt met fløde. That's how far I got. So now you understand that it is better that I give this presentation in English. The title of the presentation is Person-Centered Care and Cardiac Rehabilitation. And although this is the Copenheart closing event, I'm not talking about Copenheart. I'm not talking about if Copenheart project is that person-centered or person-centered enough. I'm more talking about in the abstract on what is person-centered care and how can we implement person-centered care. And then it's up to you, and that's really what I hope to conclude with today, that it is a kind of a trigger for you to think on how are we providing care today and where are the potential aspects that we can learn from person-centeredness and implement this in cardiac rehabilitation. Some years ago, this woman expressed herself in this way. Obviously, she was in need for rehab, but in her perceived needs, she thought differently. And to a certain extent, this has to do with the fact that her perceived needs did not coincide with the real needs. And also in healthcare, this is often quite happening. And the reason is that we as healthcare providers try to do our best, try to offer the care of which we think that the patient needs, but not necessarily our patients are thinking alike. And this is where person-centered care is coming into play. Some years ago, Bas Bloem, who is a professor of neurology in the Netherlands, he gave a presentation at one of the TED events. It was a TEDx event in the Netherlands. And he was advocating for patient involvement in the care. His talk is just brilliant. So I thought, I cannot do this better than he is doing. I took the video of his presentation. It takes 10 minutes, but definitely I cannot do it better than he is doing. So let's have a look. I have to say, the title of his presentation was From God to Guide. Good to know.
Another busy day in the clinic. Let's see what we have today. There it is. All right. First patient, please. Hello, what can I do for you, sir?
Yeah, doctor, my right hand is trembling a lot. I'm very sick about it. Can you help me, please?
It looks just like Parkinson's disease. You know what? Why don't you take levodopa carbidopa, 62.5 milligrams, 3 times a day, not with the meals, mind you, and I'll see you again in 3 months' time. Here's a prescription.
Doctor, please, you have to take me seriously. This is very bad news. It will change my life completely. I want good and reliable information. And I want to have part in making the decision to start treatment or not. And where can I find another patient like me? What can I do to make things better? So, this kind of medical care is not the reason that you once became a doctor, is it?
Hans, follow me. Let me tell you a little bit about Parkinson's disease, all right?
Okay.
Come on, have a seat.
Where shall I sit, doctor?
Hans, in the world you've just created, there is no more hierarchy. So take any seat you like.
Oh, I take that one there.
I've purposely removed the desk from my office because this is really working together in the healthcare system. And I want to tell you a little bit about Parkinson's disease, and I'm going to show you a video so you know what it really looks like. And I'll also show you the video because it shows you the power of patients and their ability to compensate for the disease. This is a nice little tool that was given to us by the Reshape team in Nijmegen. So, can you see this properly?
Yeah, okay.
All right. So we'll start the video now. It's a man with Parkinson's disease who's had the disease for a long time. Yeah, just move it. And as you can see, he has severe difficulties walking. But in the office, this man told me he was actually able to ride his bicycle.
Wow.
And I said, that's impossible.
Yeah.
You see, he's severely handicapped, but he told me he was able to ride his bicycle. So we decided to take him outside and see what it looked like. Because I was surprised by this message. I said, you know, this is impossible.
And this is not possible, I think.
You think it's possible?
I
that
don't
this
think
man...
so. No, I don't think so.
Well, there he is.
Oh, wow.
We went outside and have a look. And we were just as surprised as you are probably now.
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
that's amazing, yeah.
And I think I'm showing this video to you because patients have a huge power to compensate for their disease. So even though patients have, of course, severe difficulties, they have remarkable abilities left. And that's the reason I'm showing this video to you. Look, here, he climbs on the pedals. You see that?
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
and that's very amazing.
And luckily he returns. Huh?
Yeah, of course.
And look at this. This is actually the best part of the video. Look at this. There. Hop!
Up a day, yeah,
But now he's stuck again. He was immediately frozen to the ground.
yeah.
And you know what is remarkable?
Oh,
I had never seen this before, but I received hundreds of emails from all around the world by patients, just like this, who had a remarkable ability to compensate for their disease. And you know what? They knew it all along, but we didn't. It was staring us in the face all the time.
it's remarkable, yes.
Is it clear to you now?
Astonishable. Yeah, I know, it's clear, yes, thank you.
Is it all right if I take the podium and spend a few minutes talking to the people, explaining what we should do?
You may go.
Okay, I'll be back with you in a minute.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just seen is a remarkable transition in a few minutes' time from a doctor who once was a god in his ivory tower, or actually in a yellow forklift. And I think it is time that doctors descend from their ivory tower and become a guide, a coach in the life of patients. We would like to call this participatory healthcare to exemplify that this is a world where doctors and patients are working together on a mutual basis. Of course, the roles are different, but we have mutual respect and we collaborate with each other. And make no mistake, this is not a world where patients are ruling, where patients are bossing their doctor, which is what some of my more conservative colleagues are afraid of. This is not what patients want. Patients want to be taken seriously. They want to take actively part in the process. And this is neither a world that is dominated by ICT or gadgets. I think the tools that you've just seen are helpful in supporting this new type of care. But it should always have one goal, and one goal only, is to serve warm human contact. Because that is what patients are waiting for. And then ICT and all sorts of other technologies can serve that main purpose. Now, if you are still hesitating whether or not you should make that transition yourself, let me just give you a few good reasons. We've heard it today. One is hospitality. I think we should really start to see our patients as clients. For them, a visit to the hospital is an experience. And if we just treat them in the way the bus driver that we've seen earlier today was treating his guest, if we start treating patients this way, I think we're going to make a huge move in the healthcare system. The video of the patient on the bicycle, to me, is a huge source of inspiration. And I am surprised, week in, week out, by the power of patients, how they compensate for their disease, how they battle all the difficulties they encounter every day in their life. And I think today we've seen wonderful examples of all the patients that have been here today, showing their power. And I think we are underutilizing that power. And we still think that patients should be treated as passive objects rather than an active subject who can contribute to their own health. And if you're still hesitating, and if not for any other reason, engaging your patients is cost effective. Let me give you one wonderful example. What I normally do in my clinic is tell my patients to come back after, say, 3 months. But if things go bad, 3 months is too late. But if you're doing fine, 3 months is too early. So they've done a randomized clinical trial where in one arm of the study, the doctor traditionally said 3 months, 6 months. And in the other arm, the patients were left free to come back whenever they felt the time was right. And do you know what happens? They come less often. The number of no-shows goes down. And the patients are always just on time because they decide when to come back. And I think those are just wonderful examples of how engaging patients is a way to maintain the quality of care and at the same time reduce the costs. And then finally, and we've heard it today, it is a choice. I chose my job because I'm passionate about healthcare. I have compassion for my patients. For me, seeing a patient as a partner, as a sparring partner in the health process is the only way. I cannot see any other way. And if we start to treat patients as active subjects, working for me as a doctor becomes so much more pleasurable. It becomes so much better, more effective. And again, I think in fact, it's almost not a choice. I think it's the only way to move forward. So I tell you, I have a wish cookie, a secret wish cookie. But that wish cookie I want to share with Hans, because Hans is a real patient of mine. He has Parkinson's disease. And I think it's amazing that Hans is here. And Hans, why don't we open that wish cookie together? What do you think?
That's a good idea.
Shall we press the button? There we go. It's participatory health for all of us. We want to thank you.
Let's do it all together.
So this was Bas Bloem. He is a real inspiration to me when talking about participatory healthcare and when talking about patient-centered healthcare. Let's dig a bit deeper into these concepts. Well, it was in 2001 that the Institute of Medicine of the United States published this landmark report. It was a report on how healthcare in the future should look like, how healthcare should be reformed to be able to provide the care that is needed in the 21st century. And part of this report was on high quality care. What is needed to provide high quality care? And the Institute of Medicine said, well, there are in fact six criteria. Quality, high quality care should be safe, effective, timely, equitable, efficient, and patient-centered. So this means that patient-centeredness is a critical element of high quality care. It's not nice to have, it is must have. And patient-centeredness by the Institute of Medicine is defined as providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs and values, and ensuring that patient values guide all clinical decisions. Let's be honest. If we look at healthcare today, to what extent are healthcare professionals able to see and to appraise the individual preferences and the values of all patients? And to what extent are these values guiding clinicians in their clinical decisions? I believe there is room for improvement. How to do this? Well, this was one of the things that the Picker Institute wanted to help clinicians and organizations with. The Picker Institute is an organization that really looked at how can we implement patient-centered care. And they identified 8 components, 8 things that you should do to come to patient-centered care. First is fast access to reliable health advice. Effective treatment delivered by trusted professionals. Continuity of care and smooth transitions. Involvement in decisions and respect for preferences. Clear, comprehensible information and support for self-care. Involvement of and support for family and carers. Emotional support, empathy and respect. And attention to physical and environmental needs. Some of these elements are well known. This is the reason why some people say, well, but this and this, that's what I'm doing. And that's true. This is what some healthcare professionals are doing. But not all 8 of them. Let's be honest in this respect as well. And I would like to highlight 2 aspects of this. Involvement in decisions and respect for preferences, and involvement of and support of family and carers. I believe that these are the weakest parts of the chain. Involvement of patients and families. Indeed, you can ask yourself, are we really putting the patients in the driving seat? Are we really making sure that they are the managers of their condition and that we as healthcare professionals are not guiding their direction, but supporting them to go in the direction as they want? Once again, this is what patient-centered care is also all about. And this is, I assume, the weakest link in the provision of care today to come to patient-centered care. Not only clinical care should be patient-centered, also research can be patient-centered. And this is actually the reason why in the United States the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute has been initiated. This is a research institute with the aim to involve patients in all processes of the research, all phases of the research process, from the very early conception even up to the latest interpretation of the results of the study. In all phases, patients should be on board, according to Picori. Their credo is you cannot talk about patients without having patients at the table. And therefore, they are also funding research, but only research is funded when it is clear that patients are the partners in the research process from the beginning to the end. Another initiative in this respect is the James Lind Alliance. The James Lind Alliance is all about priority setting partnerships. If you look at the research that is done today, who is deciding what research is doing? Is it the patient? Quite often it is not. And this is what the James Lind Alliance is all about. They are setting up priority setting partnerships which enable clinicians, patients and carers to work together to identify and prioritize uncertainties about the effects of treatments that could be answered by research. You see, it's not a researcher who decides what research is to be done. It's the patient, the carer, and the clinicians. No surprise if you look what is coming out of these priority setting partnerships and you link this to what is happening today, that there is a big difference. Let's have a closer look. Roughly, we can divide research into 3 categories. One group is drugs, research on drugs, vaccines, and biologicals. Another group is radiotherapy, surgery, perioperative care, devices and diagnostics. And a third group on education, training, service delivery, psychological treatment, physical therapies, exercise, complementary therapies, and so on. Clearly, rehabilitation belongs to the blue group. When we look at commercial trials, it looks like this. A vast majority of the commercial trials is on drugs, vaccines, and biologicals. When you look at the non-commercial trials, and I think that Copenheart is belonging to this group, it is a more balanced way. You see indeed more non-commercial trials are looking at the blue group of therapies. But if you look at what patients and clinicians really want, it looks like this. So it clearly shows that there is still a long way to go if you really want to meet the needs of the patients and clinicians. I'd like to give another example, an example from rheumatology. It has been a long time that rheumatologists were thinking that pain was the most critical element, the most important outcome in the treatment of patients. And then the OMERACT 7 group has been launched. And they were listening to the patients. And what they found out was it's not pain, but fatigue that plays a role. So this means as of that moment, they took fatigue as one of the more prominent outcome measures when new trials were set up. In other words, looking at the outcomes of trials, you also have to consider these outcomes that are preferred by the patients, that are indicated as being important by the patients. So, from a more generic point of view, what are the things that our patients want in terms of research? They want that researchers do investigations on long-term effects, wanted or even unwanted effects of treatments, safety and adverse events of treatments, complementary and non-prescribed treatments, early diagnosis and treatment and harmonization of practice, and on self-care. And it's so hard in the scientific community today to find funding for this kind of research. Yeah. And due to this fact, sometimes science is seen as something that is happening out of society, something that a group of people is doing, but this is not really what society needs. And when it comes to patient-centered research, we need to bring science back into society. And you also see that the solid line now turns out in a dashed line. This means that patients and carers should come into the scientific community and vice versa. Over the past 10 minutes, I have been talking quite a lot about patient-centered care, whereas the title of my presentation was person-centered care. Is this the same or is there a difference? Well, to a certain extent, there is a common base. Patient-centered care and person-centered care has a lot in common. But the most fundamental critique that can be given on the term patient-centered care is that we are reducing the individual to a patient. and therefore not looking at the person behind the patient. That's the reason why person-centered care, or the term person-centered care, should be preferred, because it's a more holistic approach where you look at the person that is sitting before you and not necessarily to the patient who is sitting before you. Let me come to the conclusions of this presentation. Education, service provision, psychosocial therapy and exercise and so on are seen as research priority by patients and clinicians. So when you look at Copenheart, this clearly is meeting a need from the patients and the clinicians. So Andorte and Selina, you have done something good in launching this project. Research and trial endpoints should account for patient-preferred outcomes. Look at what they think is important and take this as an endpoint in the trials. Involvement of patients and carers in research, clinic and practice development, that's important. This is the way how we can come to the participatory healthcare where Bas Bloem was talking about. And finally, look beyond the patient, look at the person that is in front of you. Thank you very much.